Frederick Douglass, like his fellow American Renaissance writers Herman Melville, Harriet Beecher Stowe, and Walt Whitman, lived and wrote into the late 19th century. He was born in 1818 and died in 1895. Douglass's life spanned the century. The narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass appeared in 1845. He was 27 years old then, and he would live for 50 years more. If aging brings a sense of frenetic fragmentation of life that we find figured in Whitman's autobiographical specimen days and in his interminable revisions of Leaves of Grass, in Douglass's revisions we find a gradual expansion. Writing, for Douglass, was a process imagined as a filling out. Note how, in an important passage in the 1845 narrative of the life, Douglass describes learning to write by surreptitiously using copybooks belonging to Thomas, the son of his master. Douglass describes how he inserted his own hand, his own text, in the spaces left between the source text and Master Thomas's copy. His later revisions keep this image of what we could call his scene of writing. His writing in the spaces left suggests, as William W. Cook argues, the existence of a subversive voice writing from the margins, continually adding to the body of his narrative as he revised. We could imagine Douglass as using writing to produce additional space. The narrative would come to define Douglass's public persona, and he would continue to revise this text throughout his life. He published two major revisions of this autobiography, My Bondage and My Freedom in 1855, and Life and Times of Frederick Douglass in 1881, which he revised once more in 1892. Although the 1881 edition of the Life and Times includes a modified version of the copybook passage, I want to draw our attention to a slightly different figure for writing found in one of the later chapters. As I review the last decade up to the present writing, I am impressed with a sense of completeness, a sort of rounding up of the arch to the point where the keystone may be inserted, the scaffolding removed, and the work, with all its perfections and faults, left to speak for itself. Douglass's completeness included finally giving in to the public demand for the details of his escape from slavery. In 1845, he explained that he had two reasons for not including this part of the narrative of his life. That doing so would prevent others from escaping as he had done, and that he would risk the lives of the people who helped him by identifying them. By 1881, he can fill in these previously withheld details. He can also now attempt, in the conclusion to the same edition of the Life and Times, to frame the numerous lives that he has lived up until this point. It will be seen in these pages that I have lived several lives in one. First, the life of slavery. Secondly, the life of a fugitive from slavery. Thirdly, the life of comparative freedom. Fourthly, the life of conflict and battle. And fifthly, the life of victory, if not complete, at least assured. Yet it would not be the case that victory had been achieved. He adds to this text, beyond its conclusion, a new third part, which he opens with a first chapter titled Later Life. Beginning again, Douglass takes up his pen to produce an apology for his recursive autobiography. I have been embarrassed by the thought of writing so much about myself when there is so much else of which to write. It is far easier to write about others than about oneself. I write freely of myself, not from choice, but because I have, by my cause, been more forced into thus writing. Time and events have summoned me to stand forth both as a witness and an advocate for a people long dumb, not allowed to speak for themselves, yet much misunderstood and deeply wronged. While political needs once more drive Douglass's writing, he adopts different literary forms as both he and the century age. There's a heightened degree of organization to be found in his later texts. He increasingly writes with what we can call a layering, revisionary process that strives, with each revision, to bring a unity and a completeness to his textual representation of his life. The final words of his final text bring him to what he calls a fitting and happy close to my whole public life.